In this video, I'll go over everything you need to know regarding the strategies on the tracks in the Triforce Cup, the track picking, item sets, power item spots, bomb spots, and the shock spots. So without further ado, let's start giving her, bud. Just before getting started, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I can guarantee you won't regret it. Also, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video and leave a comment because I'll probably respond to it. Yeehaw, bud. Starting things off, we have Wario's Gold Mine. This is the most basic track in the game to drive, and in combination with the only shortcuts on this track being easy ramp shortcuts, I think it's safe to say that this is a running track. The only problem here is that it can be pretty difficult to get into the front early because the beginning of the race can be a bit of a mess. A lot of people will draft each other after the first boost panel, which can make getting an early breakaway really difficult. In 6v6, I think your best bet at making it to the top would be picking this with spots behind first. Your team will be able to get some easy drafts, and while keeping those top spots after the initial drafts is no guarantee, it is a starting point. In general though, this is a pretty crazy track at the beginning, and honestly, I would not suggest picking this to begin with. You have 3 item sets on this track. The first set is at the bottom of the downhill with 5 single boxes. Even though you should not bag on a track like this unless you actually need to, I guess I'll mention that unless you hug the wall after going over the boost panel, you won't be able to slow down for this item set. At the second set, you have 4 single boxes with a double box right of the very left box. I'd expect some pretty heavy duty item fire on the following turn. And at the last set, you have 3 single boxes with a double box right of the very left box. And while you can get a box by taking the other route, it's so much slower and you most likely won't have any reason to take that path. Also, be careful in case of items being thrown on the downhill or the uphill. You can't really use the golden too well here, but if it means anything, begin goldening after the boost from the boost panel runs out. It'll last until the mine section, so it really isn't that bad. The star strat isn't that special, but it is nice to use here since it is a tight section. Chain your star into the last set, and it'll pretty much last until the finish line, which means it's great in a lap 3 situation. Speaking of lap 3 situations, activate your build where you would otherwise chain another mini turbo, and it'll drop you off right in front of the finish line. It's pretty convenient, especially on lap 3. You have a few solid bomb spots on this track. The first one is right after the little ramp shortcut. If your opponents trick off the ramp optimally, they'll land right into the bomb and won't be able to move out of the way until it's too late. Pretty solid. Another decent bomb spot is before charging your super mini turbo before the last set. This is a pretty tight section on the track, and you'll be able to screw people over before they could potentially screw you over. But if you want to take your opponents by surprise, back your bomb as you're on the downhill, preferably early. Not only will your opponents not be able to see the bomb until it explodes, but this is also a really tight section on the track, so it's pretty insane. I think a last set shot can be really good, but it's super situational since there isn't much track left between the last set and the finish line. In most cases, the safest and likely most effective shock spot would be chaining into the second set. You could shock some people after the boost ramp, and that's about it. Of course, you do have more time in between that set and the finish line, which is a pretty big plus over the last set in a lap 3 situation. This shock spot really isn't that special because you can say the same about the track in general. But with that, we're finished with Wario's Gold Mine, so let's keep her going on SNES Rainbow Road. While SNES Rainbow Road is another basic track, for the most part, I think this track is a bit easier to run than Wario's Gold Mine. At the very least, it's easier to maintain top spots at the very beginning. So, surprise surprise, this is a running track. It's definitely a rare track online, but it can work. In 6v6, you could pick this for all sorts of top spots, honestly. You could pick it when you have almost all top spots, if you have lots of spots right behind first, whatever the case may be. The only shortcut on this track is a shortcut anyone can take regardless of their item, so running this track can be a piece of cake. But yeah, the main idea here is that SNES Rainbow Road is a basic track, thus also being a running track. You have 3 item sets on this track. Yeehaw, bud! At the first set, you have 6 single boxes. This is a pretty wide turn, so you'll have a lot of room to nail an item. Other than that, this is your average first set. At the second set, you have 4 single boxes with a double box in the middle. Nailing the double here can be pretty tricky, especially on lap 1. Considering how good of a runner this track is, make sure you can nail at least 1 item here if you're itemless. And at the last set, you have 3 single boxes with a double box right of the very left box. It's really important to know that things can get really hectic after this set since the track is so tight, even with there being a split path coming up. Just keep that in mind. Again, this is a basic track, so you can't really take advantage of Goldens here, but for what it's worth, activate your Golden after your last Ultra Mini Turbo runs out. It'll finish a little before the first set, so even if you can't use the whole Golden in a lap 3 situation, it's still a decent strat. This star strat is kind of underrated, but I think it's a really good one. Simply chain your star into the last set and drive normally. You'll be invincible on the tightest section on the track, which is really reassuring. And the build strat here is pretty decent. Activate your build during the ramp shortcut, and you'll once again be invincible on the tightest section on the track. It'll drop you off right before the final turn, so all around, this is a decent build strat. The first 2 bomb spots on this track are pretty cool. Back your bomb after the first ramp, ideally between the right side of the track and the middle ramp. This is a really good bomb spot, and you can really take advantage of your opponent's lines. This one could do a lot more damage than you think. Another solid bomb spot is right after the ramp shortcut. It's a pretty good one even against those who don't take the shortcut, but for those who do, they'll be in for a treat, since they can't move out of the way until it's too late. And lastly, back your bomb on the straight before the split path. This is a very reliable bomb, since this section of the track is very tight. You should expect to land a few hits if you're close enough to the pack. You should have enough time left in the race to take full advantage of this shock spot. On top of that, it's a really good one. Chain your shock into the last set. On top of having a good chunk of time left to catch up, you'll be one of very few people with items on the tightest section on the track. Obviously, this bomb spot is still situational, as are most shock spots in this game. So if you're too far behind, you'll probably have to chain into the second set. But if not, last set should be your go-to shock spot. It could help you out a ton moving forward. Anyway, we're finished covering SNES Rainbow Road, so let's keep on giving her on Ice Outpost. Ice Outpost is a really fun track to drive, and while it definitely is more technical and interesting than the first 2 tracks I went over, these 3 tracks are still all comparable. Every shortcut on this track can be done shroomless, which is a big reason why this is a very strong running track. It is a little similar to Wario's Gold Mine in the sense that the very beginning of the race can get pretty hectic, but I think this track is a lot easier to run altogether. In 6v6, you should generally pick this track with a good chunk of top spots. Ideally with top 3 or 4, you could even pick this to potentially draft first after the first turn. Either way, as long as you know how to drive this track, you can get a solid run on this track if you're starting in the front. So, Ice Outpost is a running track. You have 3 item sets on this track, and there are a few on both the green and yellow path. At the first set, you have 6 single boxes. Nothing too special, just be aware that the paths are pretty tight, which could lead to having difficulty avoiding items. At the second set, you have 3 single boxes on the yellow path, 2 single boxes with a double box in the middle on the green path, and a single box after the first shortcut. So yeah, and you aren't left empty-handed if you take the shortcut. And at the last set, you have 2 single boxes with a double box on the left on the green path, and that same arrangement is mirrored on the yellow path. Either way, nailing a double box here could be a challenge under the wrong circumstances, so just keep that in mind. The Golden isn't that great on this track, but for what it's worth, begin Goldening after the first turn. It'll run out before the first shortcut, and you should be able to make it without any difficulty. This star strat is pretty solid, but on its own, you can still get target shocked. Chain your star into the last set. If you have shrooms, I'd suggest using them on this turn, so if you get shocked right out of your star, hopefully you won't get target shocked. Again, on its own, you'll have to worry about the entire glider section and getting target shocked, but as well, you're also invincible on a pretty deadly turn. The build strat here is really good, especially in a lap 3 situation. Activate your build as you go over the yellow path's shadow. It'll drop you off right in front of the finish line, so yeah, really good in a lap 3 situation, and it's definitely a lot more reassuring than the star strat. The bomb spots on Ice Outpost are really strong. To start, back your bomb on the big straight before the first shortcut. Your opponents won't be able to switch to the yellow path if they've already committed to this straight, so you'll be giving her, no doubt about that. Another solid bomb spot is a little before the last set. I'd suggest backing your bomb next to this wall, blocking opponents from taking the yellow path. This bomb spot can also be effective at hitting people after the second shortcut. And lastly, back your bomb on the turn before the glider. Try to aim for a bomb spot where your opponents won't be able to switch over to the yellow path in time. If you play your cards right, this bomb spot can do some serious damage. This is an incredible shock spot. Chain your shock into the last set. While your opponents could make it to the glider ramp while small, you'll still have a massive opportunity to catch up or to win the race for your team. The turn before the glider is a pretty tight section on the track where a lot can go down, so being one of the only people in the room with items can be really reassuring. You could also target shock some people, and anyone shocked on the turn before the glider will be in a really bad position in the race. All around, this is a pretty great shock spot. Had there not been a glider ramp, this shock spot would be goated. Anyway, the job has been done on Ice Outpost, so let's finish strong on Hyrule Circuit. Hyrule Circuit is a pretty hype track in my opinion. It's a fun one to drive, and it's a very fair track as well. However, this is one of the strongest running tracks in the game. If you get into the front, you can really run away with the race. However, I did mention very fair, as even though this is a super strong running track, this track is also home to the best shock spot in the game, but we'll get to that later on. In 6v6, you should pick this spot when you have at least top 3 or 4, or any arrangement of 4 of the top 6 spots as long as you have first. This is also a track that could work out for you in Mogi if you want to pick it for first. So yeah, Hyrule Circuit is a pretty damn strong running track if you ask me. While you do have 3 item sets on this track, one of them is basically irrelevant because of the ending shortcut. At the first set, you have 5 single boxes, as well as a single box if you have a shroom to take the shortcut. If you're starting in a spot behind top 2, be ready to shroom through the off-road on the big turn if you pull one. Especially if your team isn't starting in the front, shrooming up can be a game changer. At the second set, you have 4 single boxes with a double box in the middle. All I can say here is that this is by far the most important item set on this track, so don't take it for granted. And at the last set, you have 4 single boxes with a double box right of the very left box. Unless you're bagging, this set will probably mean nothing to you since you can save at least a whole second by taking the ending cut, whether you have an item to take it or not. The golden strat on this track can be really good, but you'll have to take a weird approach. Take the shroomless shortcut, then use your golden once on the final turn. Begin goldening again once you can shroom through the off-road on the right. From here, just golden normally. It'll run out as you're taking the beginning shortcut. It's a great golden strat, but pretty unconventional. This star strat is really good, especially in a lap 3 situation. Activate your star as you enter the ending shortcut. It'll last until a bit after the finish line, and considering you're using it on the tightest section on the track, this star strat is pretty awesome. And the bill strat is pretty insane. Activate your bill as you touch the glider ramp. Make sure to hold right on the staircase, and you'll go down really fast. Your bill will drop you off on the straight after the slip path, so yeah, it's pretty sick. The bomb spots on Hyrule Circuit are pretty great. After the glider, back your bomb a little before the second set. This will make avoiding the bomb near impossible for the people behind you since it's such a tight section on the track. An amazing bomb spot takes place as you're taking the ending shortcut. You can either back it between the wall and the fence or just back it right before the ending shortcut. Either way, your opponents will be forced to go around as a faster method, which can make for a huge gap between you and your opponents. And lastly, backing your bomb at the start of the final turn. This is the tightest section on the track, and while it is less effective than the bomb before the shortcut, this bomb spot is basically a guaranteed hit. If you only have one bomb though, I'd back it before the ending shortcut for sure. This bomb spot is pretty great though. Like I mentioned earlier, this is the best shock spot in the game. You don't want to target shock your opponents on the glider section, but rather shock them after boxes by chaining into the second set. What makes this shock spot amazing, especially in a lap 3 situation, is that you're shocking your opponents after the most important item set on the track. They'll either have to go wide for the last set or not have any item for the rest of the race by still taking the ending shortcut. In a 6v6 situation, your team could literally flip the race in your favor like it's another day in the office. Having items after second set when most of the room doesn't is a very big deal, and it can lead to some of the easiest wins you'll ever see in this game. But with that, we're done with the strategies on the tracks in the Triforce Cup. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, stay tuned for next week when I go over the driving on the tracks in the Crossing Cup. We're halfway done with the DLC tracks, and it feels pretty surreal, honestly. It's just amazing knowing how far we've come over the months, and now we're getting close to the end. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic day, and keep on giving her, bud.